We're got it. Before we get started, we are providing translations for today's meeting. To get translation set up, go to the bottom horizontal control bar on the bottom of your screen, click on interpretations, and we will have interpretations in Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Cape Verdean Creole. Then click on the language that you want to hear, and you will then have access to the language in this meeting in that language. Before we kick off the entire meeting, I want to give a brief overview of the guidelines, the community guidelines of today's meeting, so we can maximize our time together. We will keep the chat closed during the presentation to reduce distraction, and we will open up Q&A at the end of the meeting. In order to get as many people as possible, we will have a 2-minute maximum for comments and questions. This will not be the last time. As I mentioned earlier, this is our 4th meeting, but lots of opportunity for engagement, and there'll be opportunities to engage with the team in the future. You can also reach out to the team at White Stadium at boston.gov. And you also can find a lot more information at boston.gov/white-stadium. So, next slide. So let's get into the agenda today. The purpose of this meeting today is to give a report back on what we have heard from you all, from the community, and really understand how that feedback is reincorporated into the plan and the project. You won't see details about the transportation plan tonight, but we will continue to refine details from comments throughout this night. White Stadium is a part of the larger beloved Franklin Park Action Plan and the Franklin Park ecosystem. So we're going to start with a presentation from the Parks Department on the history and the evolution of the park and the city's commitment to invest into the park. I actually next want to introduce, before we go into the presentation, I would like to introduce the mayor. Her vision has been deeply, deeply embedded into how we envision White Stadium and how we envision to our Parks Department. So Mayor Wu, I see you on.
Mayor, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Great, thank you. Very strict moderation, good job. Everyone needs to ask to be unmuted. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And thank you to all the community members who have put so much of your volunteer and personal time into following this process, and to all of our team members, both at the city, BPS, at all of our departments, and the Boston Unity team as well, for working so closely together. I know it's been already quite a journey, and we still have several more milestones to go here. I just wanted to share some of what I've been hearing as I've been in different spaces around this process, and other work that's happening in the parks world and in the schools world in Boston, and then share a little bit of my kind of personal view of this project as well, as we get to the this stage of where we're headed for this project. I think it can, some of what I have heard, and I know what our team has heard, is that it can feel like we are under a lot of time pressure, and that many of the conversations have been incredibly focused on one particular part of the project, or one part, and city government in general often can be working on so many different things that we're trying to maximize, and have different teams working on the stadium and the BPS part of the stadium, and compared to the team working on the Elma Lewis Playhouse process, compared to this and that. And so we really even had to have some real internal conversations about, not just in this area, but overall, how do we really try to put it all together, make sure we stay focused on the why and the who, and the bigger picture of how all of the pieces really kind of mesh together. This is a particularly complex and unique project because it touches not just our historic park, but our schools community and surrounding neighbors and the larger community. Franklin Park really is the intersection of so many of the priorities, challenges, and hopes and dreams that our community members share. And that makes it all the more important for us to get on the same page about the big picture. But it also, if we do this right, also means that every bit of investment and focus and resources that we put to this can really have exponential impact because this is such an important place to do it. For me, this is also very personal. My schedule is all over the place. There's no kind of typical day. And so because the weekends are often very, very packed and work days for me, I try to pick one day a week that is my kind of down day to do some laundry, take care of some errands. And usually I also sneak a walk around Franklin Park. It's always a different day of the week. It's always at a different time of the day. And so I get to see the park in all of its glory and all of its different iterations and all the snapshots of community. And no matter what time you're there, it is beloved, well used, and again, you just feel the heartbeat of the community when you're there. I was there just even earlier today doing a lap around and then ending up in the stadium on the track just to center myself for today's conversation. And you can see in many, many places how much of an impact it will be, why it is that we've been talking about trying to restore this jewel within the larger jewel for so many decades in Boston. And we have a generational opportunity to do this together as a community. What is important about, and we'll hear from Superintendent Skipper in a little bit on the BPS particular benefits and the vision and what we're so excited about. For me as a whole, the fact that we are able to attach all of these conversations to the action plan that just happened to have been completed in time for this and in time for Olmsted's 100th anniversary is really a blessing for all of us to guide our thinking and to make sure that we are making the investments that actually will provide a foundation for what we should have been doing anyway. I've had a lot of deep research also about Olmsted recently, and really learned a lot about how this may be the most influential figure in landscape architecture history ended up being based in the Boston area, ended up kind of living out his career here and seeing Franklin Park as his kind of finale. And in fact, that his vision matches so much of what I observe in my viewpoints and slices of getting to see the community on any given week, that parks are not just for beauty or for the visual, they're not just even for health, our mental health or physical health, but Olmsted had this term called communitiveness. That was his general philosophy. That parks, and by communitiveness, he meant the feeling that you get when you truly care about what's happening to your neighbors from all different walks of life, people you've never met before. And he believed that parks were essential to this feeling of communitiveness. In other words, parks not just as beauty and as health, but as democracy, more fundamentally as well. And so to get that right, to really live that out, it really has to be kind of in shared ownership with the community. And we're now kind of down to some of the really important decision points around facets of this project and how that fits in with the Overlook project and all the work that we're doing in other parts of the park, all the work that we're doing in other parts of the Boston Public Schools. And I'm really eager for us to kind of zoom out to the big picture and make sure that we are building that sense of democracy and shared ownership, not just in this project, but in the legacy that we are carrying on. So I just want to thank everyone for all that you already have done for this and all the hard work that is still to go. And please know that I am extremely involved in this, as is everyone in our senior leadership team, because we know this may be one of the most important projects that we undertake in our administration, a generational opportunity and one that we are going to make the most use of, not just for us now, but for those grandkids and kids of grandkids to come. So thank you all, and thanks for being here tonight.
I'm going to pass it over to Superintendent Skipper.
Great, thanks so much. And thank you, Mayor. I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk about a project that we in the BPS believe it will enhance our athletic programming across the district. This is truly a transformative renovation that is going to help provide our students in BPS with a multi-service athletic complex, pretty much unlike anything we've ever had or dreamed about. Today, the stadium is regularly in active use, but it's clear that it's really not yet being used to full potential. Since we returned from the pandemic, participation in our sports programs, they haven't yet recovered to what we would consider our pre-pandemic level, which was 44%, especially for our young women athletes and for our students of color. You know, we know the longstanding benefits that participating in youth sports brings. And we in the BPS, we're committed to increasing student participation because our students need to have access to athletics and extracurriculars outside of the classroom. I saw that benefit firsthand when I was a principal at Tech Boston for many years, and I'm fully committed, as are all of our staff, to really making sure we increase access and participation for all of our students. I'm grateful to our mayor and to the team for building a partnership that I believe provides the resources that we need to expand our offerings and to really dream big about our athletics. Our students need that, they deserve it. We have tremendous athletes, and the idea of really being able to, you know, with the new field, have a professional maintenance schedule that's going to allow our students to, more and more of our BPS teams and students, to really use that field. The indoor resources that the project will provide that will be a second home for many of our students as they stay on top of their academics and they learn to build healthy habits and relationships, really prioritizing their health and wellness. This is really the idea of like scholar athlete. And that's something that the combination of the field and the combination of the indoor facilities, I think, will bring a new world for our athletes. I really look forward to hearing the updates on the design tonight. And, you know, we are fully committed with the city, with the mayor, to building out our athletic program and staff to make the best use of what is going to be an incredible new resource for the city and for BPS. So thanks so much for having me here, for having our BPS staff here. We're very excited. We do believe that this is a life-changing project for our young people. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Skipper, and thank you to the mayor for outlining the vision for White Stadium. It's not only an investment into our parks, but an investment into our young people. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to hear, to explain the vision. I want to also quickly acknowledge some of the electeds that are in the room, although we will not at the front end give a chance to speak, but right before Q&A, there will be an opportunity to speak. I see Representative San Antonio, District 7 City Councilor Tanya Anderson, Boston City Councilor at Large Henry Santana, and I was also told that Rep. Chris Worrell was also in the chat as well. So thank you for our local representation as well. Okay, we have a presentation for you tonight, and I want to hop right into it. Don't want to take too much time. I will hand it over to the Parks Department, and just a reminder that the chat right now is disabled, but at the end it will be open and open for Q&A, live Q&A as well. So hand it over to Liza and Kathy.
Great. Thank you for being here. And I'll start. I'm Liza Meyer. I'm Chief Landscape Architect with the City of Boston Parks Department, and had the pleasure of working for a few years with city colleagues and a consultant team led by Reed Hildebrand and an extensive group of engaged community members on the Franklin Park Action Plan, which we released at the end of 2022. So I'm grateful that our mayor came on tonight to highlight some of what's so important about Franklin Park to all of us in the city. And I'm grateful to be able to work on projects in this park alongside all of you for the last several years. And it's exciting to look ahead at what's to come. Next slide. And we can just go straight to the next one. There's a quote here from the action plan that both highlights the care taken within the planning process to ground the plan recommendations in a deep understanding of the park. And it highlights the importance of where we are now in reviewing and shaping the proposed projects at White Stadium. And go next. So as was flagged, tonight's meeting is about alignment of the Franklin Park Action Plan, these projects and the alignment with the Franklin Park Action Plan. And over the course of the 3 years of the plan, we worked to understand what kinds of investments would make meaningful improvements in how people can use and enjoy Franklin Park. We worked to understand what we as a city need to do to improve our stewardship of this amazing asset. And we work to ensure that the proposed changes in the park are grounded in the park's history, ecology, context, as well as community use and history of community stewardship. So these primary plan recommendations, as highlighted here, focus around circulation, improving the ecological health of the land, welcoming people into the park, and renewing key features, all of which together compose the foundations of this place that we love. So we can go to the next slide and look, oh, yeah, that one, thank you. Here we're looking specifically at the Playstead, which is one of 4 key magnet destinations in the park. It's a destination for athletics, for events and gathering. It's framed by the trees and trails and rock outcroppings at Long Crouch Woods to the east, and the stone terrace of the Overlook to the west. So that's number 4, the Overlook, and then Long Crouch Woods is 1 and 2. White Stadium sits within this larger space. And as the mayor noted, the Parks Department is working on improvements at the Overlook. We're at the very beginning stages, and at the Bear Dens. And each of these, including work at White Stadium, needs to take the larger Playstead into account when making design and programming choices for these contributing sites. All of these spaces together become the larger Playstead. So if you look at the next slide, the action plan itself reinforces the idea of the Playstead Fields as a central gathering space as conceived by Olmsted. All of the key program destinations surrounding the Playstead will be linked through pedestrian and bike circulation, spaces for spectating and people watching, and restoration of natural features. You can go to the next slide. And as those of you who have been closely involved in the action plan process know, the plan recommendations extend across management, maintenance, and capital investments. And to make good on this, the mayor has made significant commitments to plan implementation in all 3 areas. So I'm going to pass it to Kathy Baker-Eclipse to highlight some of those.
Thanks, Liza. My name is Kathy Baker-Eclipse. I'm the director of the capital plan for Boston Parks. So like Liza was saying, since the action plan's launch in late 2022, we've been enacting some of the key recommendations and early action items in the plan. We want the action plan to be the spark that catalyzes transformational change in Franklin Park, the way that influences the way city residents use the park and think about the park as part of their daily lives, and the way the Parks Department manages, maintains, and invests in the park. The management and maintenance practices are some of the most impactful shifts in thinking that the action plan recommends. In the State of the City last month, Mayor Wu announced that the foundational changes in those areas. The Parks Department will be adding a new maintenance crew specifically for Franklin Park to take care of the day-to-day needs in the park, and a Franklin Park administrator, someone who can ensure the proper coordination in the planning, management, and communication across the entire park, and all park users to make sure the park feels and is welcoming and safe. We appreciate any help you can provide and to help us find the right person for this role. We're also working with Boston Unity Soccer Partners to develop a memorandum of understanding to make sure that the impacts to Franklin Park that are outside the lease area are considered and appropriately managed. A portion of the proceeds from the Winthrop Square Garage was put into a trust to provide perpetual maintenance and programming funding, which has been used to perform invasive plant removal, cobble and drain cleaning, and some masonry work in the Overlook in the past year. You'll also be seeing some pathway repaving on Glen Road beginning this spring. In 2023, we began working on capital projects at the Bear Dens and are excited to begin work in the Overlook shelter. Next slide, please. We've been advancing a relatively small project at the Bear Dens between Playstead and Seaver Street and Long Crouch Woods. This space was once managed by the zoo and is focused on stabilizing the existing features and addressing safety concerns that will allow us to come back in future years and think about how the space can be reconsidered for new community uses. I'm going to go a little bit slow here so people can scan that QR code. We are working on finding a date for the second community meeting sometime in March. If you'd like more info, you can go to the project website at https://www.boston.gov/bear-dens, or just scan that QR code. I'll pause for one more second before going to the next slide. Okay. All right, next slide. So highly relevant to the White Stadium conversation we're having tonight is what the plans are for the Overlook Shelter area. The Franklin Park Action Plan recommended returning the Elma Lewis Playhouse to the Overlook Shelter as it was in the 1960s and 70s. We're at the very beginning stages of that work through a programming and design study to figure out what the space needs to accommodate the Elma Lewis Playhouse program and how it relates back to the Playstead. We've received interest in the project from several design firms and are currently reviewing their information. So as we get further into this design process, keep an eye out for more from us throughout 2024 as we have community conversations and work through the schematic design. I'm going to now hand it over to Morgan McDaniel, Deputy Chief of Operations.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Hi, everyone. Morgan McDaniel, Deputy Chief of Operations. If you've been following this public process, you've likely seen me before. The next section and main section of our presentation, we're going to structure by organizing it by the main feedback that we've heard from community and stakeholder groups in terms of how this project is related to the park. Hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions. To provide the best updates we can, we'll be hearing from folks on the city team, our architecture team, as well as Boston Unity Soccer and their design team as well, integrated into sort of one voice. So next slide, please. So speaking of things that we've heard from the community, I just want to echo back the community process we've had to date, starting last winter, spring, when the City of Boston PFD's architecture team started engaging with BPS students and coaches. In July, when the first public presentation was given of Boston Unity Soccer's proposal, many small group meetings we've had with BPS coaches, running groups, students, neighborhood groups, multiple public meetings we've had on transportation, community benefits, and supplier diversity, our meeting in January on Article 80. And now here we are tonight with our fourth public meeting sort of officially on this proposal. Next slide. All right, so the first concern and piece of feedback we want to talk about tonight is the fact that this process has been segmented into just talking about the East and West Grandstand. Next slide. Yeah, so we understand that's really difficult. It's hard to consider and review a project in two different parts. There is a reason for that. It has to do with the legal structure of this project. We are structuring it so that the city can prioritize our main goals of maintaining control of BPS facilities and making sure that we can provide state-of-the-art amenities. But we understand that when we're asking the community to think about a project, really should be presenting you with the whole as soon as we possibly can. So we're really happy to be able to present unified designs to you tonight. Next slide. So as a bit of context before we get into it, I just want to take a step back and describe the process of how we've gotten to where we are. First of all, a revitalization of White Stadium has been discussed for decades, unfortunately without any outcomes. The city has never included a full renovation of White Stadium in its capital budget since construction in 1950. There have been many proposals for various partnerships and approaches, but none ever succeeded at finding the right combination of funding, partnership, and private benefits. And so as part of the Green New Deal for BPS, the mayor identified a renovation of White Stadium as a major priority, and the city kicked off by engaging in a programming study last year. So I will hand it to Dan Olala from Jones Architects to tell us more about that process.
Thanks, Morgan. If you could just move to the next slide. So my name is Dan Olala. I'm a project manager for Jones Architecture. And we have been working with the city, with Boston Public Schools and with Boston Unity soccer partners, going all the way back to early 2023. When we did a study with Boston Public Schools and the city of Boston to identify the needs that Boston Public Schools athletics has. So you're seeing some excerpts from that study here, that one of the first things we did was to just catalog and assess the current conditions at White Stadium. So right now, the West Grandstand is home to Boston Public Schools athletic leadership. Their office and conference room space is there. They have a robust athletic equipment storage program. And then, of course, there are the locker rooms, bathrooms, and all of the interior spaces that support the track and field activities that happen on the field. So as part of that study, we identified some very evident deficiencies with the current building and the site. The track was in dire need of resurfacing and repair. There was some accessibility challenges with moving from one floor of the building and the grandstand. There's currently no elevator in the building to get you to the second floor. And there was a lack of adequate facilities. The locker rooms were outdated. Bathrooms were not sufficient to serve the capacity of about 10,000 spectators that is currently available in the stadium. There was water damage issues that are prevalent throughout the building, and also the building systems like heating, cooling, ventilation are just in need of modernization. So our next step to this process, if you can move to the next slide. So our next step in this process was really to sit with Boston Public Schools and really identify what the future vision is for the site. How can we offer facilities that really improve the experience for the student athlete and make this a real athletics hub that the city can have for residents all around, or for students all around the city. So we looked at a lot of different types of programs. We looked at everything from adding an indoor gym and indoor turf field to, of course, replacement and expansion of the track. We looked at a strength and conditioning and sports medicine suite, new locker rooms, and those were really all of the student athlete facing spaces. But we also wanted to make sure that we had space inside the building for student lounge and study spaces that would allow students to have that second home that Superintendent Skipper had outlined at the beginning of this presentation. So this becomes a space that that students can hang out in before games, after practice, meet with coaches, get tutoring, and it really offers more than just athletic space. The other part to that would be the offering of community space, which would allow for larger gatherings open to various events in the community and in the school system, to allow things like dinners, banquets, team award ceremonies, and just have a space that could be flexible enough to support all of those activities. So you can move on to the next slide. And of course, as architects, what we do is take all of those visions and all that imagery and inspiration, and we start to understand how that can really be applied on site, and how it can be integrated in both improving the facility and really being respectful to the park context that it sits in. So this is just a brief diagram of what the program components are. We'll show you how a variety of ways of how we started to implement that program on site. But first, I'll let Morgan talk a little bit about the partnership.
Great, next slide. Yeah, and so as we were considering all of these amazing programs that we wanted to be able to deliver for BPS, the city doesn't have all of the resources that we would want to have to be able to do everything we want to do for our students. So therefore, we pursued a public-private partnership we're really excited to be pursuing. It's going to allow us to deliver more than the city could do on its own. So that is rebuilding White Stadium to its existing capacity of 10,000 seats, a high-quality natural turf field, plus state-of-the-art student athletic facilities, plus a maintenance partner that will help us sustain the quality of investment. And besides that, we're excited about the partnership with Boston Unity Soccer because of all the benefits that professional women's soccer brings, including mentorship for student athletes, civic and community pride, and the advancement of women and girls athletics. So once we had that partnership in place, then I will hand it back to Dan to talk about what the rest of that process looked like.
So this is just going back to the programming and visioning exercises we talked about in the slide prior. We looked at adding the indoor courts and a half-size turf field onto the site, and also looked at implementing some of this program on the east side, which the buildings that you see here really started to become a bit larger in size and height, and it felt a bit like we were imposing too large of a structure on the park. And we also wanted to scale back some of the wish list items, we call them, as we did the visioning exercises, to really make this facility more appropriate for the context. So we did a couple different studies to achieve that. So if you move to the next slide. So one of the first steps that we looked at with the Boston Unity Soccer design team was to look at the possibility of implementing an 8-lane track and a FIFA regulation soccer field onto the site while maintaining the existing East Grandstand. So we did some studies to try to test that out. And the challenge here was that if you see the diagram on the right there, the yellow area with the green boundary is the size of the space that we need for an 8-lane track and a field to fit with inside it. So you can see in gray that really occupies the majority of that East Grandstand. So even in a case where we looked at partially demolishing it and salvaging some of it, we came to the realization that a track and field that is appropriate for Massachusetts state track meets and expansive use of the natural grass field, we just were not able to salvage the existing grandstand itself. Not to mention, it's also in very rough shape since it was damaged by a fire many years ago. So we moved ahead with the idea that we would demolish it completely. And you can go to the next. So as both of our design teams started to collaborate a little bit more on what the Unity, the West Grandstand would look like and how it would really start to be set up to be a unified stadium, we looked at one of these diagrams that showed the massing of 5,000 seat grandstand on the east with two building blocks for the BPS indoor program on the north and south. This was a very early diagram, and what we came to the realization of by doing this study as a team was that it felt these forms really felt like a departure from the original form of the stadium, which is this oval shape and has much more of an in the round feel to it. And on the west side, the fact that we're able to really salvage that facade that you see at the bottom right of the screen, we felt like we really wanted to start to move away from a more linear rectangular set of forms and move to something that was a little bit more contextual and felt like it respected the original design of White Stadium. So if you move to the next slide, we landed in a place where what we did with those buildings on the north and south side was to really, rather than make them more square and occupy more horizontal area throughout the park, we made them much more narrow, longer, and they start to hug the shape of the track. And as you'll see more slides presented about the development of the Grove and West Side area, you'll start to see that these building forms and this approach to the building siting starts to really unify these two ends of the stadium, even though there is an openness in between each side at the north and south. You can move to the next. Oh, and I will pass it to JP from our landscape team to talk a little bit about a little bit more detail about how this really fits into the Franklin Park Action Plan.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening. My name is Jean-Paul Charbonneau, but I go by JP. I'm a Boston resident living in Dorchester, about 1.5 miles from Franklin Park. I am an associate principal with Crowley Cottrell, the landscape architects on the BPS side of the White Stadium project. I'm here to talk about the future improvements to the site. Before we begin, I'd like to show this drawing to illustrate how the stadium project is split. The Boston Unity project shown in purple and the BPS project shown in orange. The city and the Boston Unity teams are working together to ensure this project feels cohesive and unified. Next slide, please. This drawing is an overlay of all the new and expanded buildings for the project, shown in blue, which include the West Grandstand for Boston Unity, East Grandstand, and the 2 wings for BPS offices and fitness center, the expanded track and field, and the Grove buildings. Next slide, please. Shown here is the combined site plan. I will describe the various aspects of the plan in more detail in the next slide, but more importantly on this slide are the overall goals from the action plan and our primary objectives with this project. It would be impossible to reduce the action plan to 1 slide, and to do so would be a disservice to the amount of time, thought, and community feedback that went into it, but these would be those 4 principles taken from the action plan itself. And below each goal is a description of how we intend to achieve them. In the interest of time, I will not read through these bullet points, but I will touch on these as we walk through the site plan. The only thing that I would add, these goals not only apply to our site, but it is on the project team to consider how our site affects these goals for the park. Our challenge and primary task is to make the stadium feel integrated with the park. We put these goals to the test. Next slide. Now a little more information for the combined site plan. Before I get into it, I want to state that we are at the very early stages of design. This is very much a concept of what is possible. Nothing is set. All options are on the table. But we show this now because we want to use this opportunity to share some of our early ideas, to begin our conversation, to get your feedback, and to provide you all with a fuller understanding of the changes we are studying. I understand there's a lot of information on this page, and it is a lot to digest. We will have more conversations, and in future meetings, we will provide additional drawings and details as we test and study how these changes will look and feel. I will try to explain this drawing as briefly and as completely as I can. In this drawing, Boston Unity's scope and paving are shown in gray, and the BPS project highlighted in orange and red colors. The orange color indicates walking paths, and the red tone indicates paved areas for gathering and entry. I will let the Boston Unity team talk more about the specifics of their design, and I will speak to the BPS scope and design ideas. I will start from the north and work our way clockwise around the East Grandstand. Our first attitude and position is that we believe the north entry is an important public space. The entry through the box office gates was historically a primary entry point into the stadium and very visible from the approach from the School Street and Walnut Ave Park entrance. With the expansion of the track and field and shift of the East Grandstand east, the box office entry will become slightly off-center, as indicated by the new center line. To help counterbalance this shift, we are proposing a grid of trees centered along the new stadium and a new expanded open feeling entry plaza as shown in the example on the right. This new North Plaza will provide a small gathering space for the public under shade and will be completely open at all times of year as it is today. Our second attitude is that we want to preserve as much of the history of the stadium and the existing trees as we can. In addition to preserving the box office, columns, and gates, we are also proposing to modify the existing north wall to reduce its height and install a new fence on top to provide more transparency into the stadium, similar to the image on the right. The new fences for the entire stadium are illustrated in the dark red dotted line. Also note, there are several mature oak trees, in many cases growing right up against the north walls. If these walls were to be completely removed, these oaks would be vulnerable. Saving these trees will require delicate surgery and outside the box thinking, but we think it is worthwhile to make every effort to preserve them. In the interest to be as open and as transparent as possible, I want to point out two vehicular areas: the service area for small trucks at the north wing and a parking area for BPS staff at the south wing. We fully recognize that in their current locations, the service area and parking means vehicles will travel further into the park than they do now. But with BPS facilities and offices shifting to the east, this is one possibility that we are facing. We are studying ways to consolidate, relocate, or use scheduling to minimize the impacts of these vehicles to the park. We will present those options in future meetings. Moving to the east side. With the shift east, our third attitude is to de-emphasize the east side to make it feel more modest, quieter, and more like a park. We are proposing two separate entrances at the wings to allow new and existing trees to move through and around this side. The planting design will need further study and drawing, but the east side is one area where we can recover some of the trees that may be impacted with this construction, which we will discuss in a future slide. Also weaving through the east is a secondary path network, which will allow easier connections to and from the stadium to adjacent park spaces like the Bear Dens and Long Crouch Woods. And because the east side has the greatest elevation change from around the stadium, this path will also serve as the ADA accessible route from Plaisted Drive. An example of the path character and steps shown in the bottom right image. And finally, as we make our way to the southern end of the site,
Como llegamos a la cuarta actitud.
is an important transition into the open lawn feeling of the Plaisted. This is another important public space and one that provides amenities for the neighborhood. The shift and expansion of the East Grandstand will mean that existing 2 tennis courts and 2 basketball courts will have to be relocated. We will rebuild and shift the locations of the courts, remove any unnecessary paving, and provide more areas for lawn, for smaller gatherings, and for hanging out. And finally, we are proposing a new southern arcing path similar to the one from the action plan to allow for improved connections from the adjacent park spaces to Boston Unity's Grove and to the existing park path at the bottom of the overlook wall. Next slide.
JP, any closing remarks?
No, thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you so much, Dan and JP. So I just want to emphasize that the things you've seen for the East Grandstand, the landscaping on the east side, we are early in the process, but we heard from you that you wanted to see the full picture. So we wanted to share that with you, even though as you've heard, there are many things that are still in flux, items that we know we're going to have to take another look at. And, we look forward to coming back to you with more details as we work through those things. So as our next topic, I want to provide some updates on transportation. Next slide. So first, just want to take stock of where we are with transportation planning. There's been a history of large gatherings in Franklin Park that have all shared transportation challenges. We've heard this from many residents on all sides of the park. These events have never had transportation plans, right? We've never had a coordinated approach to managing their transportation challenges. We know that professional soccer games will also have transportation challenges, but we are going to implement a comprehensive and thoughtful plan to address those. We've shared broad plans for transportation, but we understand that now is the time to dig further into the details. So big picture, Boston Unity Soccer is in the process of sharing proposals with the city for the details of game days. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And the city, with our architecture team, is developing transportation plans that speak to the specific needs of BPS athletic uses, as well as other large events that take place at the stadium and on the Playstead that need, it's clear, need transportation plans. Next slide. So to recap, in January, we announced that the Boston Transportation Department has made a commitment to the abutting neighborhoods that we will put in place event day parking and traffic restrictions. We are working through a preliminary traffic management plan, a parking study that will provide analysis of the abutting neighborhoods and traffic recommendations. And we will consider broader residential parking programs in Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, and Dorchester. We heard requests for that throughout this process. It may or may not be a helpful solution in addition to event day parking and traffic restrictions, but we are happy to consider it. Next slide. The next steps for transportation planning, as I said before, we understand now is the time to get into a lot more detail. So Boston Unity Soccer is undergoing the work to develop the detailed traffic management and control plan for game days that will address concerns we've heard from neighbors, as well as other park stakeholders like the Franklin Park Zoo. And so when I say a detailed traffic management and control plan, what I'm talking about is where will police details be stationed? Which streets will be resident parking only? Where will we have no stopping signs so nobody can drop people off? Where will we have pedestrian safety improvements? Things of that nature. So we are in the process of developing that plan and reviewing it with BTD. And then we're proposing that we will hold workshops in early April with each of the affected neighborhoods to talk about each of those items in detail. So street by street, block by block, what are we proposing and what is your feedback? That feedback will be used to further refine the plan, and the final plan will be codified in the Transportation Access Plan Agreement, the TAPA, which is a document between Boston Unity Soccer and the Boston Transportation Department. So we're happy to have that update for you, and we will be following up to schedule those workshops in early April. And our next slide on this topic, Boston Unity Soccer will speak to some updates on circulation within the park. And next slide.
Thanks, Morgan. I'm Chris Bridle, Principal Landscape Architect at Stantec Boston Unity. Our approach to site circulation has been guided by the Franklin Park Action Plan and the hierarchy logic originally conceived by Olmsted. We will work with Boston Parks to assist in establishing a new primary multimodal loop. The layout of the proposed secondary paths surrounding the stadium have been informed also by the Franklin Park Action Plan. In alignment with the plan for game days, we are promoting pedestrian and bike use, public transportation, and shuttles, and we are therefore not proposing additional parking for game days. As shown in our plan, we're providing dedicated areas for shuttle drop-off and pickup in proximity to the stadium, and ADA improvements will be coordinated with Boston Parks as needed outside our project limits. Thank you.
Right, next slide. All right, so another topic that we've heard a lot of questions about is public access, and what will public access look like to the new stadium and the Grove area. Next slide. So I just want to restate a few of the themes that we've heard and values that we share and that we agree with and are trying to honor throughout this project. Number one is prioritizing BPS and community use of the stadium, the Grove, and the Playstead. Number two is expanding public access to the stadium, which includes the track, running stairs, and public bathrooms, improving the quality of our facilities, ensuring that the events that call White Stadium and the Playstead home can remain, and establishing the Grove as a newly accessible publicly accessible gathering space. Next slide. So we want to provide a sort of clearer picture of what's available now versus what the new project will provide. You know, currently in White Stadium, the building is not open. It's open, or the stadium is open 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekdays. It's closed on weekends. So it's not available, you know, in the evenings or on weekends when community members might want to run around the track, run on the stands. And for BPS, the poor quality of the field limits use to about 250 hours per year. In the renovated stadium, we are going to be increasing the hours of operation into the evenings for community use and weekends. And the new high quality field will be able to have what is the standard use for a grass field, which is 750 to 900 hours per year. So at least tripling the amount of hours that the field can be used. Right now, the facility is in very poor condition. It is not ADA compliant. It is fire damaged. I just learned this recently, but there's no running water in the winter, which is why we can't have public bathrooms or water fountains for folks who are using the Playstead or the track. In the new White Stadium, we're going to have a state-of-the-art facility. Of course, it will be ADA compliant, and we are going to be building dedicated public bathrooms and water fountains to serve the Playstead and members of the public who use the track. And then in terms of programming space, just want to reiterate, right now we have a 6-lane track. It's not MIAA standard, can't host meets. The indoor facilities that Dan showed us earlier really don't serve students' needs. I think we can agree. In the renovated White Stadium, we're building an 8-lane track. It is the standard, and we're excited to be expanding student resources indoors with strength and conditioning, sports medicine, study areas, and community event space. Next slide. And we really just want to make it clear that this project we're bringing a new user into the stadium, but we are expanding use as a whole. We're not talking about a zero-sum game. You can see in this chart, in the top line, the current hours that BPS students are able to use the field, about 250, is so low for a grass field. And in the future, we'll be able to get up to 800 hours at least, and will allow us to greatly expand BPS soccer, BPS track and field. You'll see that BPS football is on here as well. Currently, about 40 hours a year of use of BPS football. 2 BPS football teams play about 5 games a year each. You know, we've discussed this before, but in the future stadium, those teams will have to find other home fields for their regular games. But after the soccer season is over, we will be able to bring, you know, many more teams to do end of the year, you know, rivalry Thanksgiving games. So the number of hours stays constant. The composition changed slightly. And we do want to emphasize that we're working on finding temporary and permanent locations for those football teams. And at this moment, I just want to hand things over to Tony DeRocha, who will speak for a few minutes. There's no one better to speak to the history of BPS athletics. He's a longtime BPS coach. He's seen it all. So he's going to join us today and speak a little bit to his experience. So Tony, I'm going to hand it off to you. And I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. Again, good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be able to share with you today. Yeah, I've been pretty much a lifelong resident of Boston. I came to the United States when I was 5 years old, and enrolled in Boston Public Schools. I've been a participant in athletics for Boston, allowed me to compete at a high level, high school as well as college. But most importantly, just coming back and giving back to our kids, coaching at Boston Latin, coaching at English High, cross country, having the best facility, Franklin Park cross country. But then the opposite end, having White Stadium with facilities that were not, the best. Our athletes have worked very hard, have done well, but imagine what they could do if they had great facilities. I left Boston to start Emmanuel College's program, but I started Boston United to give back to Boston kids. And again, our athletes and our students definitely need a place like the Athletic Hub, to be able to study, having sports medicine facilities, which right now most of them do not have. So again, just having better facilities is what our athletes and our students need in order for them to be able to perform at the highest, but most importantly, improve their academics. Because we know students who are active in athletics also do much better academically. So again, I know how much athletics helped me in Boston and how much it has helped my athletes over the years. So looking forward to having a much improved facility for Boston. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony, and thank you for your service to the city of Boston. And next slide. So we've shown this before at previous meetings, but in addition to the chart on the previous slide, wanted to show it again, the sort of sample future schedule to see, just sort of emphasize how fully BPS is going to be using White Stadium. Everything in pink is BPS use, plus, the Parks and Rec summer camp that takes place there, all of the community events in the stadium and on the Playstead that are so beloved, and BPS graduations. So you see in green, those are Boston Unity games, as well as the day before, a few hours of practice when BPS is not using the field. And we'll just go into a little more detail. Next slide. See, next slide. Thank you. So here's an example of the schedule in August. You can see placeholder dates for the Puerto Rican Festival, the Caribbean Carnival, and a great deal of BPS use during the summer, as there always is. Next slide. And then in the wintertime, this is in November, you see the tail end of the Boston Unity season. And then, cross country, cheerleading, soccer continues, as well as the ability to have end of season football games. And we do want to emphasize that it's really important to us that community events like BAMS Fest, the Caribbean Kitty Carnival, Puerto Rican Festival remain and are able to continue to be part of the family of events that use White Stadium and the Playstead. Next slide. So we just want to be really clear because we've seen some confusion on this and we want to make sure there isn't confusion. The lease agreement between the city and Boston Unity Soccer are going to codify the prioritization of scheduling, and that is going to govern how the field is used and scheduled going forwards. So first off is the major city, community, and BPS special events that take place in the stadium on the Playstead, establishing those dates. And then it's a collaborative process of scheduling BPS games and Boston Unity soccer games. Then BPS practices and other city events to fill in the time. And then Boston Unity will be able to have one soccer practice during the week prior to a game at a time that does not conflict with BPS practices and other city events. So just pause there for a second to take that in. Next slide. All right, and we've heard some concerns about access to the track and field, so want to reiterate that, we are, an 8-lane track and field is very important to us. All the field sports will have dedicated spaces. The details are in development. So what you see here is a current conceptual drawing. It might not be the final configuration, but it is really important to us to have all the spaces needed for throwing sports and field sports. The track will be covered during soccer games, and we are designing the track and support structures to make sure that the track is protected during that time and that investment is protected. Next slide. And then I also want to speak to the cross-country program, something, we've heard many cross-country enthusiasts speak up about the importance of this cross-country course and, offer to be part of making sure that it is preserved and, and cared for the way that it deserves to be. We want to emphasize that we understand that this course is historic. It is going to remain, and we also understand that it requires unpaved paths, and those paths will remain unpaved in the future so that the cross-country course can continue. All right, and then the next and last item on public access we're going to talk about is the proposed Grove program, an amenity that the community will be able to access and use and program. So I'm going to hand it to Tamara on the Boston Unity soccer team to speak more about that.
Thanks, Morgan. I'm Tamara Roy and the Principal of Architecture at Stantec. The Grove, we are working with the city to design the Grove to support a huge variety of programs that promote community gatherings and draw people to Franklin Park. Following the Franklin Park Action Plan, we will provide electric and water infrastructure, as well as shading, outdoor furniture, refreshments, heat lamps, and more to support the park's large events and festivals, as well as its new programming. And the city will be looking to community members and vendors for all their program suggestions. Now I'm going to pass it to Jen Epstein of Boston Unity. Next slide. Jen, are you muted?
I was talking, but I was muted. My apologies. Thank you, Tamara. Before I continue to speak about the Grove, I want to thank the mayor and her staff, Superintendent Skipper, the elected officials and members of the community for your time, hard work, commitment, and engagement with this project. My name is Jennifer Epstein. I'm with Boston Unity Soccer Partners. I'm happy to be here tonight to speak about our part in this historic project. And yes, and back to the slide here and conversation about the Grove. The next few slides will give you a better idea of the day-to-day use of the Grove. On typical non-game days, the Grove will be publicly accessible from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., which is in line with stadium hours and represents a significant improvement for public access since the Grove is currently fenced off and inaccessible. The gates will be open and the video board will be covered, except when it is being used for large reserved or ticketed events. On the approximately 20 Boston Unity Soccer game days each year, the Grove will be open to game patrons from 2 hours before until 1 hour after the game and no later than 11 p.m. Next slide, please. This hypothetical Grove calendar for June or for July shows how the Grove will be open and publicly accessible nearly every day. It could support signature community programming events like BAMS Fest, whom we hope to get to know better, and which I know is in June, and this is a July, but it's for illustrative purposes, and a range of community events with public access highlighted in yellow, including Friday nights set aside for special community events like movie nights and jazz music, and Saturdays might include a farmer's market. The green bars show the few times when Boston Unity Soccer will have matches or practices, and generally the Grove will still be open on those days as well until a few hours before the game starts. Next slide. This sample December Grove program highlights the fact that the programming opportunities in the Grove will continue and extend into the colder months as well. The yellow bars again show community events like ice skating, a holiday market, and the performance series could be at that point brought inside indoors. Next slide.
Great. And so now our next theme is the design of the Grove itself and how that relates to the rest of Franklin Park. Next slide. So I just want to reflect back some of the feedback that we've heard. We've heard concerns about private use of the Grove within a public park. We've heard about concerns and feedback on the Grove's relationship to the Overlook and the Elma Lewis Playhouse, the placement and operation of the scoreboard, and how the playset itself interacts with the stadium design. So Chris from Boston Unity Soccer team will speak to some of those things.
Thanks, Morgan. Next slide, please. So we thought it would be important and interesting to understand Olmsted's original logic and framework of the park. Olmsted designed Franklin Park to have two overarching typologies, the anti-park and the country park. The anti-park is where our stadium site is located. From Olmsted's conception, this area surrounding White Stadium, the Playstead, was designed to accommodate exertive recreation, including group activities, athletic grounds, and venues for music and entertainment. White Stadium and our proposed program are in alignment with Olmsted's original programmatic intent. The anti-park was intended to house attractions that draw people to the park, who could then use and appreciate the country park. The country park was the more naturalistic and pastoral area for the enjoyment and scenery, providing a serene and expansive experience. Next slide. This is the Grove area as it exists today. Due to poor drainage, this area frequently becomes inundated with ponding rainwater. It is currently unusable after rain events. It is also locked and fenced off from the Playstead. There is no public access or ADA access to this future Grove area from the Playstead today. Next slide. From the Playstead, the existing tall chain link fence surrounding the Grove area is overgrown with invasive species, limiting views into or out of the Grove area. As recommended by the Franklin Park Action Plan, you will see in upcoming slides, we greatly improve this condition by opening up views and public access to the Grove from the Playstead. Next slide. This is our current plan of the Grove area, which includes two one-story new buildings, both sensitively designed into their context. The buildings will accommodate food and beverage concessions, restrooms, storage for the future Grove furniture. At the center of the Grove is a flexible open lawn with paved perimeter to accommodate a wide variety of park and community events. The Grove is also designed to enhance the Playstead by providing social and gathering space that will be a magnet within the park, supporting existing and providing new park programming, blending into the park visual language and ecology, improving the standard of care, and we'll be continuing to work with the city on the Grove design in the forthcoming weeks and months. Next slide. This is our proposed design of the Grove today, as viewed from the Playstead. As mentioned previously, we are creating new, welcoming, ADA accessible, daily public access to the Grove. The new planted edges of the Grove will be much more visually permeable to allow expansive views into and out of the Grove. Our proposed buildings, as I mentioned, are designed in their respective context to be part of the stadium language and the organic informal language of the park. All the existing trees illustrated in this image are being preserved, and new groupings of trees are proposed to provide the much needed shade and further integrate into the Grove and into the Playstead. Next slide, please. Here you see the alignment of the proposed Grove perimeter fence. We're proposing a fence bronze in color that will be visually permeable and planted with native species and vegetative understory to obscure the fence line and blend it into the park in alignment with the Franklin Park and BLC guidelines. Next slide, please. The fences and gates surrounding the park will be configured into 3 states for daily use, game day, and ticketed events. And at nighttime, when the Grove will be closed, to secure movable furniture and other loose elements. The Grove will be open daily with wide, welcoming thresholds. And I'll hand it over to Tamara.
Thank you. We now have a short walkthrough animation that shows a typical day, not a game day, in the life of the stadium, walking from the Playstead through the Grove and then flying above the field and ending at the West Grandstand. We thought a picture was worth 1,000 words. So we can start. So the Grove, as has been said, is open to the Playstead and to the stadium. And while there is a fence for nighttime security, the gates will be open nearly all of the time. You're also seeing the back of the new scoreboard. The side facing the Grove will only be used for content on game days and special occasions, such as movie nights. The central green space will be for community-driven programs, such as exercise classes, drum circles, performances, story time in the park, kids tumbling, etc. The furniture will be movable. The accessory structures we have kept low so they don't obscure views from and to the Olmsted Overlook. And we are thinking of programs such as barbecue and pizza. Now, as you come around to enter the stadium, it's in its most common track and field configuration. You're also seeing the renovated stadium sides, the east and west grandstands, and their shade canopies and their new seating, ADA accessible elevators and stairs up to the concourse levels. Now, as I mentioned, we're just going to pretend we're a bird and fly back here and look at the stadium from afar. You can see the blue hills in the distance. And we're going to come around and just end at the west clamshell wall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tamara. All right, and back to our deck. Next slide. So next steps on Grove design, we've received a lot of community feedback. And so in response to that feedback, the city is going to be engaging with Reed Hilderbrand, the landscaping team firm that worked on the Franklin Park Action Plan itself, to ensure the Grove and White Stadium renovation design is aligned with the action plan and consider the value of the existing cultural assets and the cultural landscape. Boston Unity Soccer has agreed to continue refining the Grove design and the digital scoreboard in response to public comments, and we will continue to share updates. Next slide. Now, I know we're running late. We have a lot to update you on and share back, but we're going to try and run quickly through the rest of this so that we can get to Q&A. Want to say a few things about the tree canopy. Next slide. So we want to mention that we are studying the impact of the proposed design on trees. We're exploring options to preserve as many trees as possible. We would like to acknowledge that the Emerald Necklace Conservancy has done a detailed mapping of every single tree across the park, as well as planting trees in the area around the stadium, and want to thank them for that really important work. As well as to mention here that as we're talking about trees in White Stadium, it's really important to consider the action plans note that the current vegetation in Franklin Park needs a comprehensive approach to manage its health. And so we can't have this conversation about trees in White Stadium in a vacuum without also talking about invasive species, managing the canopy across the park as a whole. So we're going to share sort of where we currently are with how the proposed design impacts trees, with the understanding that this is not the end of the story. And we will continue working on this and reporting back to you. So next slide, I'm going to hand it to JP to talk about the East Grandstand.
Thanks, Morgan. The shift east may impact approximately 33 trees. Some of the largest trees are on the east and north sides. An arborist has reviewed and analyzed these trees on site. Most are in good condition, but there are some that are in decline, including our largest, shown in the bottom photo. Many of these trees are growing tightly against walls and fences, like in the upper photo, places that are out of reach from a mower. I believe many of these trees, which are mostly pin and red oaks, were not intentionally planted and what I call volunteers. But even if they are volunteers, I believe they still have value. We will do everything we can to preserve whatever trees we can, including some of the ideas mentioned in the proposed site plan. After all, even if the trees were not planned, they are still part of the story of Franklin Park and are important for us to preserve. Okay, thank you.
And handing it to Chris.
Thanks, Morgan. Next slide, please. This plan shows the proposed design for the West Grandstand and Grove. We are preserving all but 5 of the 37 existing trees within this area. The 4 small trees identified in pink on the plan for removal are immediately adjacent to the stadium facade, and we believe provide little value to the park currently. The one larger tree is a Norway maple, which is an invasive species, and arguably this tree should be removed to allow for larger legacy and heritage trees in proximity to thrive. Next slide, please. Here we are showing our proposed planting strategy. Our proposed tree plantings will follow Olmstedian rules. Specimen trees will be viewed in open areas. Other tree plantings will be arranged in groupings to blend the grove into the informal tree plantings of the Playstead. Roofs of our proposed buildings will be planted with low-growing ecological palette, and we are proposing to remove invasive understory plantings and replace them with native species in an effort to improve the overall ecology of our project site. This will in turn help to blend the stadium site into the park setting. Thank you.
Great. Next slide, please. All right, so another topic that I know is very important to those who use the park regularly and live around the park: noise, light, maintenance, safety, and other quality of life issues. Next slide. So I want to state here, we've discussed it previously, but want to be very clear that Boston Unity Soccer will be making legally binding commitments regarding minimization of noise, lighting, full cleanup after events, and professional security. This is language that's going to be memorialized in the cooperation agreement, which is the document at the end of the Article 80 process between Boston Unity Soccer and the Boston Planning Development Agency. The language will also be mirrored in the lease with the city and the MOU with the Parks Department as appropriate. Specific language is currently being drafted and will be shared with the Impact Advisory Group for review at their next meeting, which is on 2/26. Next slide. So Tamara and Jen will speak a little bit about what those commitments will look like.
Thank you. The entire city and Boston Unity Soccer Partners project will be highly sustainable under the New Stretch Energy Code and all electric. Improvements to address existing flooding around White Stadium are currently in process with our site civil engineers. We're also working closely together with the East Grandstand team on the lighting plans for the stadium and the Grove, and we'll have more information on that topic for future meetings. Jen, maybe you need to unmute.
I am unmuted. Thank you. So thank you, Tamara. We take concerns about sound and noise very seriously. In addition to the commitments referenced by Morgan, I want to add that we are engaged in a noise study to understand potential impacts and mitigation opportunities, which will be part of our ongoing conversations with the Impact Advisory Group and ultimately incorporated into the cooperation agreement. Finally, as Morgan mentioned, we will ensure that maintenance and cleaning are a top priority. To that end, Boston Unity Soccer will hire a full-time senior operations manager, which will be a senior level role responsible for the soccer team's on-site operations, the Grove, and the stadium field maintenance, and will be the point of contact with the community. They will coordinate cleaning and trash removal, the security and public safety plans, coordination of traffic and access operations, and other areas of specific interest to the neighbors. Next slide.
All right, and our last topic, clarity of process. We understand that there has been a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces. It's been difficult for people to keep track. We hear feedback that we need to be able to make that clearer. So on the next slide, providing a snapshot of where we are right now. So here we have the process for Article 80, the Parks Commission, and the Landmarks Commission. I'm just going to go through this quickly in the interest of time, but we can always come back to this slide later, and we'll be posting this on the White Stadium website as well. For Article 80, we've had public meeting, the IAG meeting, and the public comment period. Our next IAG meeting is on the 26th, as I mentioned. The part of this process is that Boston Unity Soccer responds to the BPDA's internal review comments, and additional meetings are held as needed. The end result of that process is a BPDA board vote and, as I mentioned, a cooperation agreement, which codifies the Boston Unity Soccer's commitments. Then the Parks Commission, a presentation was made to the Parks Commission on January 29th. Comments were received, and Parks Commission and the Parks Department drafted formal comments about the project. Again, next step, Boston Unity Soccer incorporates comments, presents again as needed, and then at the end result, eventually at the appropriate time, would be a Parks Commission vote, and as mentioned, an MOU with the Parks Department. I'll note that the Parks Commission typically votes on projects after they've been reviewed and approved by all other agencies, so typically would be after the BPDA board vote. And then for Landmarks Commission, the project was presented twice in January. There were public comments submitted as part of that, and it was referred to a subcommittee for further review. Those subcommittee meetings will be beginning in March and are to be scheduled, and that approval is at the end of that process. Next slide. And then I just want to mention a few other things that are happening in parallel. Number one is the lease negotiation between the city and Boston Unity, which is ongoing. The beginning of part of that process was issuing the RFP in April of 2023. We received a response in June, designation at the end of July. That designation is contingent on a design approved by the city, achieving the necessary permits. After that designation, the city and Boston Unity Soccer entered into lease negotiation. As I mentioned, those negotiations are ongoing, and at the end result will be a final lease and shared facility agreement. And then we had some questions about the city's design and construction process, so I'll just go over that quickly as well. It began, as we discussed, with a feasibility study, including engagement with BPS students and coaches, the Public Facilities Department, which does all of the City of Boston's major capital projects, procured the designer, Jones Architecture. You saw Dan from Jones Architecture present earlier. And we received the necessary approvals to do a Chapter 149A construction manager at risk procurement. Very technical, but want to give you all of the steps. And then released an advertisement for the construction manager per Chapter 149A. So there's a lot of work still to come. There will be additional engagement with BPS students and coaches, additional public presentations of the design, construction manager selection will take place. And then once the construction manager is on board, the next steps down the line would be the demolition and site enabling work, and then the early foundation and structural packages being bid, and then a full construction bid documents for trades. And the end of that process is substantial completion and final completion of the construction process. Next slide. All right. So we are almost done. I'm going to talk a little bit about next steps and then hand it back to Chief Mallour. Next slide. All right, so we want to lay out for you here what are the next sort of public touch points and some other updates. So the next public meeting is on February 26th. The Impact Advisory Group will meet. This is a meeting for the Impact Advisory Group, but it is open to the public and publicly advertised. And then, as I mentioned, the Landmarks Commission subcommittee meetings will be beginning in March. Those dates have not yet been scheduled, but those are publicly advertised and open to the public. And then in early April, as I mentioned, we'll be scheduling workshops in each of the neighborhoods around the stadium area of Franklin Park to talk in detail about game day traffic control plans. And then some other updates. We will be engaging with Reed Hildebrand to get their input on alignment with the action plan. I want to note that the open space stadium zoning that relates to Franklin Park was originally on the agenda for February 14th for the Zoning Commission. We've removed it from the agenda for more consideration. And we do want to state here that the city will not begin demolition until we have a comprehensive plan for the stadium that we believe confidently meets BPS's needs and addresses stakeholder concerns. And over to you, Brianna. Next slide.
Okay, thank you to the every presenter. Thank you to the city team and the Boston Unity team as well. As I stated earlier, we're now for the Q&A portion. I want to do a 30-minute time check, and the chat is also now open. Please remember that if you do not get your question answered tonight, we are open to continue having conversation, and also email whitestadium@boston.gov. I'm going to give a quick opportunity for the electeds to speak if they want to. I'm going to first start off with our District 7 City Councilor, Tanya Fernandez Anderson, if you want the opportunity to speak. You can just raise your hand.
I always want.
Oh, there you go.
To speak. Good
There you
evening,
go.
everyone. So I really enjoyed, thank you so much, Chief Mallour, for allowing me to just say hello. I don't have much to say other than took a lot of notes. This was very enlightening, considering aligning it with community concerns as well as the plan for Franklin Park. But I wanted to just point out, that obviously there were concerns that you mentioned that you were not going to address here in terms of transportation. That seemed to be like sort of the biggest concern for the park so far. So what I've been getting emails on, or concerns around parking. I heard consideration for residential or restricted parking, not just for the day of, but also just any day, because obviously this is going to increase the usage for the park. So I'm looking forward to more conversation. And Jean-Paul, I'm sorry, like I have to say this. You should do a presentation every single time in the way that you are presenting. Great job. I was mesmerized. So thank you so much for that. And to all the constituents who spent time. Also, like a half an hour after listening to this for an hour and a half. Can we do more? I know everybody's tired.
Yeah,
but
Councilor, we will be mindful of that. We just want to make sure
okay.
you get a chance to
Alright.
speak.
I appreciate that. Thank you
you.
for indulging us, Chief Mallour. All right, you guys, thank you so
Fine.
much. I'm here. I'll be taking notes.
Okay, Councilor Henry Santana.
Good evening. Thank you, Chief Mallour, and thank you to all the presenters. Great presentation. Like Councilor Fernandez Anderson said, I also took a lot of notes. So, I actually want to just yield my time and hear from, questions and from the community, but looking forward to being part of this process. And my office is here to share your concerns. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Councilor Santana. I see in Rep. San Matano.
I'll just let everyone else who's a community member speak. Thank you.
Okay. And last, just to check if Rep. Chris Royal is on, if you wanted to say anything. If not, oh, there you go.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Just here to listen. My staff is here to listen. We've been taking notes, but thank you for the city for coming back and aligning with the community. Thank you, Chief. And I will be listening.
Perfect. Yes, majority of the time for the community to give feedback. Just a reminder, each person will get 2 minutes to speak. So please ask your questions or explain your concerns within the 2 minutes, and you will be cut off after, just to be mindful because we want everyone to have time to speak. So the first person that I see on my chat is C, and I already apologize for mispronouncing names. C. Kaliga?
Yeah, just call me Kaliga.
Kaliga.
Yeah. Okay. So I have two different questions. I am a soccer person. I grew up in a soccer family. My brother was a pro for a couple of years, and my son is an avid player. But ironically, I'm also a BPS parent. I have 2 kids in BPS high schools, and my son goes to Tech Boston, and he is a freshman, and he was on the JV team and came off the bench for the varsity team as soon as he entered school. I am concerned. I understand there will be some scheduling conflicts. It's inevitable. And some BPS student teams will be displaced. Can some of the money be going to make sure that they have state-of-the-art facilities elsewhere for their games and their practices? And that was one question. The second one is in Mayor Wu's speech recently, everybody was very excited to hear that there was going to be a new manager for Franklin Park as well as maintenance workers. But I don't know if it's a rumor or been just, substantiated. Are the maintenance workers and the manager going to be for the whole park or mostly for the White Stadium project?
Okay, so thank you for those two. Are those the two questions? Are you all set?
Those are the two questions.
So first we have scheduling conflict and addressing that for BPS and asking if there's facility improvement for other practices or displaced BPS programs.
Yeah, so we have Avery Esdale here, the director of BPS Athletics. And I'm going to ask if Avery could unmute and speak a little bit to that.
Good. Am I working? Yep. Good evening. Great question. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of our current program at the stadium, we mentioned it is pretty limited right now. Right now we have one team that uses the facility to practice, and 3 teams that are playing their games there. So as the stadium goes offline, we will rely on other spaces within the city. Potentially Carter Playground, potentially, so I'm losing train of thought here, but other locations that already exist for the teams to practice and play their games, with the plan of them coming back to the stadium once the renovations are completed. So I think that answers your first question there.
Yes, and thank you, Avery. And the second question, maybe Liza or Kathy, just the question around, is the allotted additional employees for the Franklin Park Action Plan just for White Stadium or the entire Franklin Park?
Yeah, I'm happy to touch on that. So the Franklin Park Action Plan recommended a dedicated Franklin Park maintenance crew, and that is not related to these White Stadium improvements, as is the role of the Franklin Park administrator to coordinate across all park users and park events and everything going on in the park. So those are independent of the White Stadium and are happening with the mayor's support. So we're really excited to implement that in the coming months.
Thank you. Next I see in my list is Michael Epp.
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much for the city for holding this. I'm a resident of Jamaica Plains since 1980, also an architect. I'm also very much in favor of women's soccer. I'm also very much in favor of the renovation to White Stadium. But these are problems that have been in White Stadium for many, many years. The city should have addressed them. To say that somehow they're being addressed now is sort of a cover-up, I think, for years of at least 50 years of neglect in an environmental justice community. That doesn't seem fair to me. In reading the Boston Unity soccer proposal, it seems like it's non-responsive to the original city RFP. I think that should be addressed. Also, in reading the George White Trust articles, it seems to restrict public access. In that article, it says in perpetuity, which I think is quite a long time. Also, in my understanding of Article 97, this is a reduction of parkland and also should trigger the MIPA process, even as a courtesy. I think that should happen. Finally, the Crafts are building a stadium for men's soccer. This is a second-class facility for women's soccer. Should we accept a second-class facility for women's soccer? And my good neighbor up the street, long-term friend, former Parks Commissioner Justine Liff, in my opinion, and it's just in my opinion, I don't think she would have accepted this proposal. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I'm not sure I heard a question in response. So I will definitely take note of that comment. Next we have Chayton Green, Chatton.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shaton Green. I'm a lifelong Boston resident. I remember being in middle school, actually running on that white stadium track. So for me, it brings back a lot of memories. And now I'm happy to be the business agent of the Boston Building Trades Unions. We represent over 35,000 members and their families as well, but also thousands of members right here in our community, which are women as well. So I do love how much energy and revival this brings to the community. My questions are more so before we get to that point on how it's being built. So is there equity within the building process in terms of great careers, union wages and benefits, ensuring that the proper training is going to be held on this job? So a real high standard of education that's going along with the building of this process. So I guess my question is have you selected a responsible contractor or a general contractor, and are you working with the unions to really help be a part of this process when it comes to really giving worker equity, worker standards, and worker safety?
Thank you for that question. Just to let everyone know, this particular meeting is about the Franklin Park Action Plan. There was a meeting about this city contracting and equitable contracting and procurement. Also, just a reminder that the slides will be on the website as well. Does anybody want to give a quick response? But
Yeah, I
Sure.
think
Sure.
sorry, Jennifer. First off, Carrie Griffin, the Director of the Public Facilities Department, can say a few words on that. And Carrie, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Shantan, for your question. So yes, we received approval to do this through the Inspector General's office to do this as CM at risk. We actually had a site walkthrough with a lot of very interested contractors. We had about 40 people show up for that about 2 weeks ago, and we advertised to have CM firms. So right now, my team is in the middle of reviewing their applications with the selection committee, which is made up of BPS, Public Facilities, and the architect. And we will be working with our partners at BRJP on the goals. We worked closely on a previous project with the Court Street project to set greater goals. And we're going to apply that to this project too. And I will turn it over to Jennifer to talk a little bit about their process, which is private versus public, where we follow the statute, which is Mass General Law, Chapter 149A, CM at risk.
Thank you, Carrie. Actually, I'll have Bill Carroll, our developer.
Sorry, Jennifer, we're having some audio issues.
As many know, we've been one of our significant goals with this project is to achieve a women and minority-owned business contracting threshold of 50% for all aspects of this project, both in terms of design and then through construction, and then ultimately in its steady state with operations. And that is our overarching #1 priority. And but that being said, we are very much welcoming, we're kind of in the same time frame as Carrie and her team with our general contractor selection. We haven't chosen one yet. But we are focused on this goal, and we have been speaking with union representatives and continue to, and to see how they can help us meet that goal.
That is our number one priority. Oh, and I should say, I don't mean to say just women and minority-owned business, but also veteran-owned business with a special emphasis on the neighborhoods immediately around Franklin Park. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, can I respond or?
We have to go to
Yeah,
the next
so,
person. We have a lot of hands. We have to go to the next
all
person.
right, perfect. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you
Michael,
all.
thank you. Michael Amenzu.
Amanazu. Good evening, everyone. As a proud resident of the Garrison Trotter neighborhood and homeowner here off Humboldt, who's literally invested in the development of this community and neighborhood, I enthusiastically support this endeavor. I feel like passion for Franklin Park unifies all of us along the spectrum of opinion from support to opposition, and it's great that we're tapping into that. I frequently visit Franklin Parks for walks with my wife, golf, events, and BPS athletics. Boston Unity's investment into White Stadium and Franklin Park bolsters the action plan's promise of restoring landscape cohesion, supporting uses desired by park users, and keeping the park accessible and welcoming to its neighbors. It was great to hear today the intentional inclusion of programs and events like BAMS Fest. And it feels like the clear distinctive benefits outweigh valid considerations, a commitment to the community, which the Boston Unity leadership must remain accountable. However, it feels like the issues voiced fail to come anywhere close to the heavy consequence of not only missing out on, but actively chasing away such a transformative opportunity. For instance, worries about traffic to Franklin Park for a total of 20 game days accounts for 5% of the year, or conversely, meaning 95% of the year won't be impacted by game day traffic. And I also understand other concerns with longer and lingering implications. But overall, I'm speaking from an asset-based perspective, focused on the possibility and potential versus the pessimism of a deficit mindset. It's been a frustrating cycle of hearing people complain about the lack of investments in our area, but then when they were proposed, we're resistant to those investments, shut them down, only to restart that cycle with complaints about the lack of investments. That actually just happened on a comment just a little while ago. So many of us can clearly call to mind the same common concerns and what seem like canned quotes that come up in resistance to initiative like this. And they're valid. I understand that. And also, though, I asked, like, how many of us have the capacity to imagine a bolder vision of what we actually do want for this community? Because it feels like this proposal offers that in pretty tangible terms.
Thank you, Michael, for your feedback and support of the project. David Shapiro next.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks everybody for all the work that's been put into this and the engagement from the community. I just, by way of introduction, CEO of the YMCA of Greater Boston, live about less than a mile away in JP for the last 2 decades, and then am the parent of a Boston Latin Academy, 2 students, one who's graduated and one who's a student there and a football player as well. And I just, showed up in support for a variety of reasons. Obviously, there's still a lot to figure out. Some of these things in big public-private partnerships that are as creative as this are going to require some patience and back and forth to mitigate for concerns. I see a lot of that happening because of the engagement of the community, as well as the thoughtfulness from the city and from the Boston Unity Project. We've had a bunch of conversations at the Y with the Boston Unity Project and the city about how to ensure, and I think we've learned from some past projects, that BPS usage is as high and is as insured as we just saw, that we also take care of the teams in the interim that will be misplaced as well, which I think is important. There's a lot still to address there, but I think that at the end of the day, when you think about the chance that we have here, just to echo what Michael just said, the chance that we have to really create a world-class opportunity for student athletes in BPS, to create first of its kind women's sports franchise in the city, right in the heart of the city. It just feels like, and I think I really am echoing Michael, too much to pass up, not to follow every lead to get this done, to get it done well, to get it done together, and to make sure it makes good on its promises. And I know that the city and the Unity Project are committed to that. And I can say that the Y, which we have a nearby, one of the few soccer fields in Roxbury, at our Roxbury Center, is committed as well as committed to programming in the Grove and make sure we have world-class programming to match the the world-class facility. So I just thank you. Proud to support it. Proud to be associated with it. I know there's a lot more gates to cross, and we'll all be here to make sure they're crossed well. Thank you.
David. Next, I see Shamaya Turner. Shamaya.
Hi, thank you so much for this process and thank you for your presentation. My name is Shamia Turner, and I grew up going to football games, doing cheerleading events over at White Stadium. So this is a project that I'm happy to see. I'm also a representative for the sheet metal workers, and this is a comment. I want to echo Chetan Green's concerns around how it's getting built, and want to just reiterate that having a focus on underrepresented business owners is one thing, but you want to make sure that you're also having a focus on diverse workforce. And I'm advocating for good union jobs, wages, benefits. That means retirement, because to have a whole well-rounded process to do this right means that we're setting up the people in the neighborhood as well, like making sure that they are taken care of economically. And so I just want to come on here and add my 2 cents about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I see Sarah Freeman.
There, I think I unmuted. Thank you for everyone being here. I really appreciated the slide about the history of the 5 previous attempts going back to 1970 to improve White Stadium. It's very sad, actually. I have a long history of supporting the city and the state in their efforts to do improvements and support the parks. So I have a few questions, and I'll try to talk fast. And I have an 8 o'clock meeting, so I hope I can hear the answer and a few more questions. After the fire, whenever it was, doesn't the city have insurance? Why wasn't it repaired right away is one question. Another is, when will we get the transportation details? That's a really important piece of this. And if we are going to bring that many people all at the same time, it isn't really comparable to an all-day festival, as far as I can tell. The view of the North Plaza proposed looked like a lot of hardscape. And again, if this moves forward, it seems kind of counter to what you say you're trying to achieve with the green park-like goal. 2 more. On the days that the soccer would be there, did it look like 6 hours on those days, or would it be more? Just trying to understand the actual game day or
A few
practice.
more seconds, Sarah.
Okay. That I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, so fire insurance.
Chief Mueller, I can take those questions and I'll sort of direct them appropriately, try to be fast for you, Sarah. Thank you for being here. Why wasn't it repaired right away? Unfortunately, we don't have the answer to that question. If anyone here has the answer to that question, please share. It was quite a long time ago, and I think I haven't been able to find records that illuminate that question. When will there be transportation details? So as I mentioned, the Boston Unity is working on that analysis currently, and we will be then reviewing it internally at the city and then sharing it out for review and discussion in great detail in early April. We can certainly share those details ahead of time before the meeting so folks have time to read and absorb, and we can have productive conversations. The North Plaza, JP, are you still on with us? Maybe you can speak to that question and sort of considerations there.
Regarding the North Plaza, we very much agree. We want to remove as much paving as possible, but we also want to create a generous place for people. And so we will test these ideas and draw through them multiple ways to illustrate the way that North Plaza will look and feel. So more to come.
Great. And the last question, how many hours would people be coming, how many hours would the stadium be active on soccer game days? Jennifer and Bill, is that a question you can answer?
Thanks, Morgan. A soccer game, I mean, it's not like a baseball game, it's a 90-minute game. They are much shorter, but we will be opening up a couple hours before the game and, about an hour afterwards to accommodate for, pre and post game activities.
That would also help with transportation.
That'll also actually help with transportation because people will not all be arriving and departing at the exact same time.
Okay, thank you. Robert Jenkins, Bobby Jenkins, reminder, 2 minutes, and we'll put a 30-second reminder in the chat.
Thank you. My name is Robert Jenkins. Franklin Park is very near and dear to me. My friends and I used to sneak in and play football there when we were kids. I eventually ended up playing high school football there. Back in 1976, I scored Madison Park's first ever touchdown there. Subsequently, I came back, was a regional administrator for the Parks Department, and Franklin Park was my area. Now also another full circle is that I'm a football official. So I, have officiated football games there, and I'm one of the IGA members appointed by the mayor. I'm very in depth with the study. The concerns that, that I've been hearing from my, people I work with is during all of this great work, and I am for the project, definitely happy for this project here. With the impact of the renovations, how much usage will be able to be used in the park on all those activities and events that continually go on? Juneteenth, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Caribbean festivals, the golf course, and just the activity with the zoo. How much space will be available during this construction time? Because the construction has to coincide with both the Franklin Park Action Plan and the White Stadium renovation plan. And just making sure that all city and state agencies, come together and meet with the IGA to make sure we can definitely give this. And we're getting, I like the city's transparency in getting everybody, all neighborhoods surrounding the park together. So that's just my input I would like to give and voice my opinion. And the history around what happened, that other side of the stadium, that fire was back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Bobby, we have to go to the next question and thank you. Morgan, do you want to quickly talk about scheduling very, very quickly?
Sure. I want to, to your question about scheduling and accommodation during construction, there are many different things that we need to be thoughtful of during construction. One is the large events that are really important and take place on the Playstead. We've begun conversations with a few of those groups that run events like BAMS Fest and the Puerto Rican Festival about how we might be able to ensure that they can still be able to have their events even when construction is taking place. Avery Esdale is working closely, is leading the charge on making sure that all of the sports that take place at White Stadium are able to operate elsewhere during construction, and we are in conversations with the zoo as well to make sure that we're thoughtful about their needs during this time. So thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Morgan. I just want to do a quick time check because we're at 8 p.m. I'm going to make sure we get to all the hands that are raised and wrap up after that. So next, Fran Harrington.
Hi, thanks everyone. I just want to thank everyone for this presentation. I have heard about this project for a long time, and it was super enlightening to see the slides and all the work that went into this. I'm a lifelong Boston resident, been in Jamaica Plain for the last 20 years. I graduated from Boston Latin Academy, and I'm a huge soccer fan. So I think this is an amazing opportunity for the city, for the neighborhood, and for Franklin Park as a whole to really get more use and become the shining star of the city that it always should have been. So just wanted to voice my support for this, and thanks again for all the work and for this meeting and making everything available.
Thank you, Fran. Next is Bernard Doherty. And just to let everyone know, the last name I see is Desalia Gomes. So that'd be the last person speaking. But Bernard?
Yes, thank you very much. As stated, my name is Bernard Doherty, a member of the Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Council. Have been since being appointed by Ray Flynn in 1985, which gives you some idea how long I am on the trail here. So I went to Boston English, lifelong resident of Jamaica Plain, which was started in 1946. So I've been here for quite a while. I ran track at White Stadium in the early 60s. And it was quite an interesting place to be and quite an interesting place to see. What concerns me is that as a resident of Jamaica Plain, growing up on Iffley Road in Jamaica Plain, which directly directs to Franklin Park, and having as much time as I've had in it, I can remember when the Bear Den was a Bear Den. I can look at all this stuff and see that the activities that occurred in Franklin Park were great. They were inclusive of everybody in the community and everything else. So what my concern is here, that for going from the meeting that we last had, I remember Karen Brunder, I believe it was, from the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. She said there was many problems with the proposal. She started on the Article 97 protected, and it's held in a public charitable trust. I want to know if that is a true statement. And as such, what are the ramifications of that with regard to getting this project on the rails and moving forward? But overall, I want to make it clear that I'm very concerned with people who are the stakeholders in this process. When I say the stakeholders, I'm not talking about some organization that's been put together and runs around saying they got all the concerns. They're the people that actually get up, put the pants and dress it on or whatever, and go out and work every day. And they're raising a family, and they're trying to maintain some security within their communities. And when things come down on them like this here, they get concerned. They don't have an opportunity to be in. So they rely on people like us, the neighborhood council, to be there for them, to inform them. So when you start something like this, you've got to remember, you're just one of many large projects going on within a half-mile radius.
Bernard, we're at 2
This
minutes.
state. Thank you. I got
You want to
that.
get your questions in? Thank you.
So that was my question, the first of 97 and the other issue, but I just want to make it clear, these are the people who are actually the stakeholders in it. So please look out to their best interests. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Morgan, do you want a quick response?
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. So I think you're referring to Karen Monty Brodek from the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, who has her hand raised a few folks after you. The Emerald Necklace Conservancy has expressed their opinion that the site is subject to Article 97 and that a charitable trust, essentially they believe that the city doesn't have the legal right to enter into this contract. We disagree. We believe we've done a great deal of legal due diligence and that we're proceeding on a legal path. And Karen, please correct me if I have misstated ENC's position, but that's as I understand it.
Thank you. Pete Duggins.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to bring up just a few things. One, I think I've sat through kind of all these presentations, so hours and hours of the various iterations on the various boards here. And I think the presentation as such looks great. But, I have two concerns I feel like are often not met, and there'll be a question there. One, I mean, the name Olmsted always gets brought up because I think, we're appealing to, someone that's considered a genius in what he did. But I think even in what the mayor was talking about, the Olmsted notion of communitiveness, part of that was his idea of like that meant something, and it actually meant non-commercial, non-competitive use of space, and that being open park space. And I feel like it's always just taken for granted why we're trying to put all of this stuff in the park is because I think people consider open space empty space. And I just want to say that, there's a lot of us who, myself included, use the park twice every day. That's just not the case. I'm in a butter. I live at Eggleston Square. And, it's kind of a sacred space in the in my world, in the community, and because it is an unused space, it's got quiet, it's got nature, that kind of thing. So I really love like the look of all the designs that are there, but I will take the designers at their word that they're looking to minimize lighting levels, minimize the impact of traffic and parking, and minimize noise. But my question is like minimize lighting levels to FIFA standards is not minimal light levels for neighborhood standards or for what the current levels are. Similarly with amplified music that I would expect at a live soccer event. And then of course, my big concern is just, bringing 10,000, 11,000 people 20 times a year. For what it's worth, you can say that's 5% of the year, but that's every Friday or Saturday afternoon from May through September. So, that does affect people in major ways. That's when I like to enjoy the neighborhood. And on Friday night, I watch for 3 hours the traffic from Franklin Park, from Forest Hills all the way to Seaver Street was backed up continually.
Your 2-minute limit. So
my question is when
Yeah.
if the neighborhood abutters are not sold on the plan, in the end, what's going to happen? Are you going to push through anyway?
So I know the mayor hopped back on and wanted to give a quick comment in response to your comment. She's still, there you go.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. I had to hop off for an event and running around back now and caught a lot of the public comment up until this point, although I missed the second half of the presentation. So thank you all again for continuing to weigh in and feel some evolution to how we're moving. Just in response to the last comment by Mr. Duggins, and I don't pretend to be the expert on Olmsted, but I have had a lot of immersion in a lot of aspects of what the vision was, just to be sure that I could personally feel comfortable and that we were upholding the legacy that is that has been passed down for over a century at this point. And Olmsted's vision, in fact, on commutativeness was not for just quiet and peace. It was certainly about the restorative function of nature and green and to provide urban city dwellers with a bit of respite. But he very much divided the park in a way to have the country park as the quiet part and then the anti-park as the place where there would be activities to draw people in, to have foot traffic, to give people a reason to come so that they could then experience that immersion in nature as well. Olmsted was incredibly practical about that. And that's why there were bear dens, even before the zoo existed as a zoo, before the fence went up around the zoo, it was there with animal exhibits in order to draw people in. The place that was designed to be full of activity. And so in some ways, there were private refreshments at the refectory building on Refectory Hill and at the various places that the Overlook shelter was originally designed. This was part of Olmsted's original vision. So I think sometimes we are trying to modernize that in a way that is actually not accurate. The vision ultimately was to bring people together and give everyone a reason to be there. And so activity, health, well-being, it is simply not accurate to say that this was outside of what Olmsted planned for in terms of all the elements of a park. And particularly when it comes to women's soccer, I'll admit I may be a little bit biased around the function for democracy and bringing people in, but there couldn't be a more perfect team and sport and kind of partner for us in terms of what this aspect brings to our young people and the idea of commutativeness as well.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to hand it over to Ricky Thompson. Thank you for that answer.
Good evening, Ricky Thompson. I'm also a lifelong resident of Boston, also graduate of English High and used the track as some other people have stated. The White Stadium means a lot to us, and we definitely would like to see it renovated and put into good use. But I do, because I'm president of Franklin Park Coalition, I want to thank you for acknowledging the Overlook, that it is under consideration for renovation and as part of the action plan. Should be an amphitheater erected there. Alma Lewis came into a neglected park and made an oasis of music and art and theater there, and we want to recognize her legacy and put that spot back into good use. But my question is, we do a lot of events in the summer. The zoo is very busy in the summer, and we park on the opposite side of the Pierpont by the zoo and the opposite side of the playstead. So I'm wondering if with this new project, will we be shut out as well as far as parking? Because I know parking has to be restricted in order to manage this parking around this event. So that may not be something you can answer tonight, but it's something I think you should consider, especially even in the scheduling. And the last thing I want to say is that the folks that talked about equity, being born and raised in Boston, equity is always a concern when it comes to jobs, contracts, and business opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. Morgan, do you want to speak to that? I know that the transportation plan is not finalized, but.
Yeah, I'll just say that, we're looking forward to continuing working with the Franklin Park Coalition as well as other stakeholders, hear your concern, and look forward to working with you more on that.
Karen is next. Unmute yourself.
You say my name? Sorry, that's
Yeah.
the quiet first tonight.
Oh,
My
it's-
name is Karen Monty Brodek. I'm president of the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. I really appreciate everyone being here. I really appreciate seeing the images that we saw tonight. And I really regret to say that that's the first time I think many of us have seen them. And I don't believe that Olmsted's Park should be cast in amber. I think that parks have to respond to modern needs and concerns. And I will tell you all, I played varsity soccer my entire career at the Atlanta Public Schools in a terrible stadium that smelled so bad I couldn't even change my outfit in it. I get that this stadium needs work. It is obvious. We spent years talking about it in the action plan. I don't think there's anyone here that disagrees. I personally love women's soccer. I saw the professional women's soccer team play in Candlestick right before they blew it up. That's what they did to the stadium after the women's team played there. I care so much about this park. I think there's so many folks here that do. I think that it is more than regrettable that the community, after the action plan was confirmed, never got an opportunity to talk about what they'd like to see. Because the action plan, then tonight I was told this meeting was about the alignment of this project with the action plan. And I see at least 3 ways it does not align. The community was never talked to about a professional sports team coming in. It just wasn't. And the action plan talked about a community process. And the action plan did great work and talked to so many community folks, but none of those folks were engaged in whether or not this was the right thing for the stadium, for the park. I think, unfortunately, this is treating all these pieces separately. And also, unfortunately, I don't want this process to be slowed down. I want the park to be renovated. But unfortunately, the city's proposal, in my estimation, and the estimation of a plain reading of the law, does not comply with the state's laws about the use of public land, recreation land. That can be changed with a 2/3 vote of the legislature. It takes a year or so, but they've done it. But that process, this park, these needs should not be overlooked. I want to see this park renovated. We all do, but it takes time. And I'm sorry that process has not happened till now. I regret that this is another couple of years before the stadium gets renovated based on what I'm seeing now because of the major problems and oversights that have been skipped. Finally, the city has put $50 million into this project. Right now, that is what we understand, is that $50 million of public dollars are going to go into this project and $30 million of private investment, perhaps more, are going to go into this. But the point is, it would be pretty exciting if the community had ever been at the table to say what could happen with $50 million, because I think this park is meant to serve the community that is around it and the BPS students on a full-time basis. And I fear that those conversations and those needs are going to be displaced by a massive new facility, which is amazing, state of the art, but was actually never contemplated in the action plan. That process could happen. The community could be on board. But right now, with the timing and the demolition plan of the building and the needs that this league of amazing leaders wants to do, that's going to require a lot more time than this effort has for the 2026 deadline that is imposed here. And, you know, I want all of these things to come together, but unfortunately, I don't believe the process is allowing for that. Everyone's saying everything's on the table today, but these are the 5 trees that are going to be removed. It really doesn't seem like the community
Okay, we're at
process.
the 2 hour, we have the 2-minute mark, so.
Yes, that I think Olmsted would have wanted this neighborhood to partake in. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Morgan had a quick response, but thank you for your comments.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Just wanted to reiterate that we are in dialogue with the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. We've heard their legal concerns. Our legal experts do not agree.
Okay, Dorothy?
Thank you so much, Brianna. And I want to say, as a constituent who has a job, lives next to the park, clearly have a lot going on with 3 kids, I feel like I have been engaged. So thank you for reaching out to me and letting me know about the process and hearing my feedback. I really appreciate it. And I keep on hounding you all about transportation. And so my question, which I know is going to be answered in April, but I want to set it up, is I saw that there wasn't really the space that my question hits at is where BTD hits, I guess, the Parks Department. So not sure who's going to answer it. And I saw that there's now a active mobility loop, which looks like Circuit Drive. Is that correct? Okay. Oh, my question is that if that is now an active mobility loop along Circuit, are we going to address the bike lane along Circuit? Because currently, and also pedestrian access, because there's like one space to cross on Circuit Drive, and the crosswalk is like not painted. One second. I know this is not raised. Cars are going like 60 miles per hour. And the bike lane there, I'm not talking about the very nice walking path. I love that. But the actual road has a bike lane. And I know tons of people with kids who specifically don't bike on it because it's just like not a comfortable, you don't feel safe biking on it. So I just hope that as we talk about Circuit Drive, that we look at ways to improve that so that people will choose to be riding their bikes up Circuit, because it connects, well, it'll connect right down to Blue Hill Ave with all the work that BTD is doing along that corridor, which I love. And it also connects straight up from Southwest Corridor, right down by the Shattuck.
Thank you for that. Just reiterating, obviously, like, you know, the transportation plan will be built out closer to April, but addressing the bike lanes on Circuit Drive and making sure that that's thought through for the transportation plan. Does anyone from Parks want to respond, or is that? I'm just making.
Happy just to add on that, yes, making safety improvements along Circuit Drive is something that was identified in the action plan, is top of mind for the Parks Department and park users. And we've heard it for a very long time that we need to be taking a closer look at that. So that's something we hope to be doing as an early action item as we make improvements associated with the action plan. It'll maybe be looked at through this study, but improvements to Circuit Drive are not necessarily part of the stadium proposal. I see that more as a more comprehensive multi-departmental city effort that will probably have a longer time frame and need to look more comprehensively than the stadium itself.
Thank you for that response, Liza. Next, I see Pamela King. And then we'll next have Toki Wright, just to be on and prepared. Pamela?
All right, thank you so much. I might have missed it, but I thought that I heard a lot about track as it relates to the Boston Public Schools utilization. I've only been to White Stadium for football games. So did I miss something? You know, just are we going to have facilities to have football games? I think Thanksgiving Eve, they always had a football game between certain schools. I'm a little retired, so my memory might be failing. That's one question. Second question is, it sounds like there is a private component to the building and the construction. and some kind of partnership with the city. But I'm wondering if the ordinance requiring Boston residency to have 21% minority workers and 51% Boston workers will apply to this project. My third question is, will the developers private, and I don't know if they're union people that are going to be working with the $50 million from the city, but would they be willing to start a training program to work with our underserved, marginalized Black population to start training them to be shovel ready for apprenticeships on this project? So there are 3 questions there, and I would appreciate an answer to all of them.
We sure will. Thank you, Pamela. For the first questions around football and the partnership with the city and BPS track, I'll pass it over to Avery.
Good evening again. Great questions. I think as we've illustrated and discussed in our calendars, we are going to have to make some modifications to how we deliver football at the stadium. The plan now being after the season, we will have space for games in November and for our traditional rivalry games. So those Thanksgiving games, the Thanksgiving Eve games, possibly some MIA playoff games, all will be able to take place on the field after the kind of season and time that we have to block off for the commitment and work with the Unity Project. In terms of track, the stadium has been the home of our City League track meets for high school and middle school for a very long time. And we're excited to bring that back in a renovated space once the project is complete. The commitment's still there, and I think the goal would be to look at how we're able to do more for track, whether it's from a developmental standpoint, whether it's hosting high-level meets, whether it's looking at what other track activities we can bring in there to create an experience. So all are things that are going to exist at the stadium, but I think we'll be able to do at a higher level once the project is complete.
Did I hear you say no football there?
Modified. So we're going to have to look at our schedule in a little different way in terms of how we deliver it, but there will be football.
And sorry, Ms. Pamela, I can speak to question 2 about the jobs related to construction. I think you're talking about the Boston resident jobs policy, which is a city ordinance that requires development projects over a certain size to have a certain percentage of Boston residents, and on the construction workforce, a certain number of women and a certain number of people of color. Like any development project, this project will be subject to BRJP. And Bill and Jen, would you like to answer the question about training programs?
Yes, thank you, Morgan. As Bill already said earlier, that we are looking to achieve a 50% WMBE and local threshold in our contracts. And we are also looking in those efforts to use our marketing and on our own platforms to help advertise and mentor and promote growth within those businesses. This will also funnel down, we are intending for the students of Boston Public Schools and Boston's youth to also participate in a wide range of mentorship and internship programs that they will have exposure to, in many different careers that
not just construction.
Yeah, that are not just construction, but in marketing and in facilities development and all sorts of things. So yes, this is a goal, this is a plan, and we look forward to working on that together.
Thank you, Jennifer. Toki, right? Hope I pronounced that right. And then last we'll have Walt after that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the detail. And my name is Toki Wright. I am the Community Partnerships and Programs Manager at BAMS Fest, Boston Art, Music, and Soul Festival. And we do appreciate the recognition. also have many questions and value being a part of the process to continue to have that valuable conversation. My question is about the public and private use of the stadium. Will community organizations, nonprofits, small businesses, large corporations, who will have access to the stadium for private or public events? Considering a lot of our large-scale events that happen in Franklin Park, we spend a great deal of money on infrastructure, and this is potentially a very useful venue. So that is my question, and I will yield my time.
Thank you. Morgan, any scheduling? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just say in general, you know, it was a pleasure to speak with you, Toki, in December, and I look forward to more conversations with you, as well as the other folks at BAMS Fest. So we are looking forward to having the existing, you know, large, important community events that happen in the stadium and the Playstead to continue to be able to take place there. We are not envisioning bringing additional sort of private events, et cetera, to the stadium, you know, in addition to the Boston Unity soccer games. So, you know, we're not bringing in a concert operator or something. I think, you know, if there are additional sort of community groups that want to take advantage of the stadium, you know, it's available for scheduling, right? But would be subject to, you know, special event review by the city, but we're not envisioning other sort of gigantic events happening at the stadium. That said, we also hope that the Grove area will be additive to the events that take place on the Playstead, like BAMS Fest, Puerto Rican Festival, and others, as sort of an additional venue that you could take advantage of.
I seen Jennifer unmute. Did you want to add to that? Are you good?
Yes.
Well, we just say that, Toki, it's good to meet you, and we definitely think that the Grove could be a really important support venue and infrastructure piece to what you guys have going on, and some of the, just as an example. But to all the things that are happening in the Playstead, there's real infrastructure and support, another venue, another stage, and we look forward to as many ways as we can to be supportive and part of that whole thing.
Thank you. Walt, and then actually I seen Dasalia hop off and then hop back on, so we'll make sure you get to answer your question. Walt.
Great, thanks. I'll try to be fast since it's so late. So I think a lot of people know that 175 of neighbors and I have signed a letter supporting the project, and we're still pretty excited about it. But that support is contingent on a bunch of core issues being resolved, so what I heard tonight makes me a little concerned. We're not going to have transportation workshops until April. I've also heard, and I'm hoping you can help here in a concrete way, I've heard that construction could start as soon as April. So I'm worried about sequencing. I think that some of the issues that we want to deal with, noise in particular, traffic, parking, we need to have some serious conversations in order for us to know whether we continue to support the project. We'd like to, if we don't, we'd like to voice that before the Article 80 vote. We'd like to voice that at the Parks Commission. If we do, we'd like to voice that just as strongly, and hopefully we do. And the next question will be faster, which is I think it was Chris Bertle. You put up a slide that Dot made a reference to that looked like a transportation loop around the park, around the stadium, pardon me, within the park itself. And my question is a simple one. Would shuttles be on that, or is that just for Ubers and such? That's, of course, relevant to those of us who are right across from the White Stadium entrance. And so we'd like to know whether there's been some planning that might cause that White Stadium entrance not to be the Walnut Avenue entrance not to be used.
Okay, thank you all. Sequencing.
Sure, I can answer that, and then I'll hand it over to Chris to answer the second part. Hi, Walt, it's good to see you. So As we sent a letter over to you yesterday in response to your very thoughtful letter that the residents of the Parkside Neighborhood Association sent, to sort of reiterate what we expressed there, we sort of laid out a path forward for getting to that level of detail to work in collaboration with you on transportation and get to documentation there. And then sort of our timeline for drafting the language around, noise, maintenance, security, et cetera. That language will be shared with you when we share it publicly. And then when we have that language drafted, that's the point at which, we will be happy to meet with you. So we have something concrete to discuss and hopefully get to a place where you are comfortable and continue to earn your support of the project. And to the construction timeline, I think we were initially hoping to be able to begin demolition in April, since we are on a tight timeline to be able to take advantage of this amazing opportunity. But we do want to make sure that we're bringing people along and have comfort with the design. And so we're not going to be engaging in demolition until we've resolved some of these key items that people have been speaking with us about. And then I'll hand it over to Chris.
Thanks, Morgan. And thanks for your question. In that diagram that was the purple primary loop, it's my understanding that's intended to be a multimodal pedestrian and bike loop predominantly, and that shuttles will have limited access to that loop. The extents, I think, are still being worked out, but there'll be limited and scheduled use of very small partial areas of that loop.
Thank you, Chris and Morgan, for answering. Last question of the night, Dasalia Gomes.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for this opportunity. And thank you for this important community process. My name is Dasalia Gomes, and I was born and raised in Boston and attended BPS schools throughout my childhood. Franklin Park is an essential part of bonding with my family, and I have wonderful childhood memories from White Stadium. I'm a Black female union construction worker, and I wanted to echo Chaton Green and Shamia Turner about utilizing all union labor during construction to ensure equality on multiple levels. The union standard is making sure everyone has access to great careers, and this includes women, minorities, residents throughout our communities. I now have the opportunity to receive world-class training without debt through a pre-apprenticeship program called Building Pathways. And now that I'm union, I have amazing health benefits and can retire with dignity. So it is my hope that whoever works in the stadium after we build it should also be union as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dasalia. And that's the last comment of tonight. For the people that have unanswered questions or have dropped questions in the chat that we were not able to answer, if you dropped a question in the chat, our team will follow up with direct answers for you. Also, you can email whitestadium@boston.gov to get questions. It's constantly being responded to. Even some people on this call have submitted questions in letters and have received a response. Also, please let you all know that the presentation and the recording of this meeting will be on the website at boston.gov/white-stadium. And again, thank you all for hanging in there tonight and staying over and getting the questions answered. This is an ongoing process, and keeping community at the center and stakeholders at the center have been top of mind for the city and the Boston Unity team. So thank you for all your work, and thank you for hanging in there tonight. Again, have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate all your time and your commitment and your passion for your spaces. Thank you so much for being here tonight.